Okay. In a moment when everyone is thinking about physical health, we need to remember just how important it is to keep our mental health intact as well. Obviously, there has been quite a strain, what with having to deal with change, with having to deal with isolation, and all the other things that affect people who are in quarantine. Also, many people are dealing with grief, fear, etc. Our next guest is a mental health counselor, Harriet Fraad. She's with us to talk about how the coronavirus impacts our mental health and the challenges posed by virtual psychotherapy. Harriet Fraad is a mental health counselor and hypnotherapist in practice in New York City. She is a founding member of the Second-Wave Feminist Movement. Harriet specializes in speaking and writing about topics in which psychology and economics overlap. You can follow her on Twitter at Harriet Fraad, Fraad, and you definitely need to listen to her podcast, Capitalism Hits Home. Harriet, thanks for being with us.
Oh, I'm delighted.
So, Talkspace is an online therapy platform. Since February, they're reporting more people have been seeking therapy, and mentions of coronavirus have increased 15 times
Yes,
in the past 3 weeks.
I'm not surprised because everyone is affected by it. First of all, in terms of mental health, people are afraid, and that's not an irrational response. We have a plague upon us, and we have utterly irresponsible, egocentric leadership in our president who says one thing contradicts the next, is busy exonerating himself from the blame he deserves. And so we don't know where we are. We don't know if and when we could ever be safe and resume our lives. So some of our terror is perfectly rational. However, we still have to deal with it. The other thing that's going on, which is very hard for people, is that we need each other. We are herd animals. Human beings never would have survived without other humans because we're not the strongest, the swiftest. We don't have the best hearing, the best eyesight, but we could act together to trap huge animals and share their meat. And we could work together to find.
We need to do that with Trump. Trap him as a huge animal and share his meat.
Sure. Exactly. But, whatever it is, Trump couldn't be Trump without the permission and acquiescence of many. And America.
What you're saying is, as herd animals, we don't feel safe without the herd.
That's right. And we have to, if we dare to go outside in the city, we have to keep separate. Instead of people being a potential source of communication and solidarity, they're a source of disease and contamination. So we have to back up, fear other people, which is not mentally good for us. Then on the other hand, from going outside into the unsafe space where people thoughtlessly may crowd us and sneeze or cough, we go back into our homes where we're isolated.
My daughter does not want to go outside. She's having a hard time because she's 4 years old. And when we go out, there's people with masks, and she's not allowed to do the thing that comes natural to her as an extrovert, which is go up to people and make friends with little kids. And I mean, she was the one in the neighborhood who'd go talk to pretty much anyone in the park, petting the dogs, etc. And when we saw some friends the other day walking up the other side of the street, I shouted across the street, "Hi!" I forget. "Hi, Lauren." And my daughter was so excited, and I could see her wanting to go across the street. They had their 2 kids with them. Everyone was masked up. And I said, well, we're not going to go say hi right now, but we will, another time. It's just this instinct. And I fear the kind of, at such an impressionable age, the kind of damage that, might be done, or understanding that becomes a permanent understanding of the world, that it's dangerous.
Well, I do think she'll change as the situation changes. However, that does affect everyone. Mentally healthy person's idea is we are all connected.
Mm-hmm.
We're connected to one another. And now we disconnect on the one hand, and we overconnect on the other, because people are isolated with their homes. A client said to me, "Oh my God, I've been married 20 years. I never spent this much time with him."
Oh,
On my
tell me
nerves.
about it.
So kids are home.
I
In
love him for 3 hours a day, but 24, that's a lot. That's asking
a
quite
lot,
a bit.
it's happened quite a bit. And people get into routines, and those routines are entirely disrupted. Those routines are like the cords that hold up a bridge, the steel cords. They are the structure of our lives. They're gone.
I was thinking about routine, having worked from home before this happened and being in kind of the same routine I was before this. When my husband started to have to work from home and wasn't able to do part of his work because he runs a biology lab and is a biology professor, so he can't do the lab part. He can do the professor part. You know, I think the fact that he absolutely had to fall into the schedule that I already had, and the fact that we just already had a routine really helped keep people or keep us sort of just flowing naturally into, we have this routine. And on the weekend, when there's no routine, forget it. It's like, I'm just like, we're just going to work all of the days, because the work days with their scheduling routine, I'm here at work, then I go and watch our daughter while he goes back to this very desk and does his work, and then we both have dinner, put her to bed, and then we do, whatever. Either a lot of times we go back to work, often I just crash and fall asleep,
Yeah.
etc., etc. But
Yeah.
having that routine is incredibly important. What would you suggest to people who are struggling now that they don't have a routine?
Well, the first thing to do, I think, is really important, is to create a routine. For me, my routine is I get up, I have a cup of coffee and look at the latest disasters in news,
Yes.
and then I do a workout. And from there, I have that routine, because before the plague, I went to the Y every morning and planned around that. My clients who I see, my Y schedule, my writing and thinking schedule. And I wasn't always perfectly disciplined about it, but I had some external structure. I had the Y and my classes every morning. I then had my clients. So I had this structure that held my life. And now I have to be the one to make that structure.
Mhm.
And if one is living with other people, and right now my husband and I are living with my daughter and her husband. So now there's 3 other people to adjust to. My husband and I have been married 54 years. We've managed to adjust to each other. Gladly, I'm glad of that. But now my daughter comes in, and we have developed tolerances for each of our kind of bizarre behavior, because we've been married so long. And she and her husband come and say, "Are you kidding?" Because they're entering the mix of our intimate life.
Mhm.
So there's constant adjustment, and the structure is gone, and we each need to make our own structure, or it doesn't work. Plus, everyone is afraid, and not for nothing. So we're all more testy and have to be really careful to be kind to each other. We don't have young children here. If we did, as you do, it would be a different thing. But the structure of school or daycare is gone. Now, the obvious thing to do, if they actually were taking care of people instead of trying to manage day to day, or in Trump's case, try to manage getting profit up for the rich again, they would take those unemployed teachers and daycare workers and have them tutor the kids on the internet, and if they didn't have it, on the telephone, and talk to them every day. And that would be a job for them, so they would be paid. And the children would have some continuity, and their parents would have some relief. Of course, we don't do that obvious thing, and the children don't have it. Plus, kids have their assignments on a computer, even if their parents don't have a computer. And even if
Yeah.
their parents aren't computer savvy,
We're just about to have a guest on to talk about that digital divide and how now that all of work and education is done at home, the people who don't have computers or are not computer savvy are going to potentially be left out of the new economy.
right, and where they're already left out in the first place.
Mhm.
Some people don't have parents who can manage to help them educationally. Some people have parents who are working all day, so the kids are home alone. Some people have parents who don't speak English or standard English, so that they can't really be helpful in a phonics lesson when they don't pronounce it. You know, there are so many limitations, and people feel, although they may not consciously realize it, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be like this. We do have a plague. Other countries have eradicated this plague. You know, the top 5 countries have no new cases. They're all headed by women, which is kind of interesting. But
That's very interesting, Harriet. Let's poke into that a little bit. That's interesting.
it is. That's
Ugh.
Taiwan.
It's like you're not allowed to say about the sex differences, really, but I believe that there are.
There are huge sex differences here. First of all, I think one of the reasons the top 5 countries in combating this are headed by women is women don't fail up. Usually, if they're floundering, they're fired. A. B, they'd have to be more capable unless they're
I don't even know honestly what it means to fail up. It's not something I've ever occurred in my life to me. I know someone wrote a book about it, but
yeah. But
I haven't had any personal experience with failing up.
of course, I mean, people like Betty DeVos, okay, she's a billionaire, her husband's a billionaire, her brother's a billionaire. So she's chosen as an unqualified person to be the head of the educational system. But for most of us, for 99.9% of us, that isn't the case. And women usually have to be more capable to do well on the job. So these 5 leaders.
Ugh, I'm tired. Just thinking
Yeah.
about it.
2 of them are under 40 years old, have succeeded. To take one case, which is New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, who is the prime minister, who has a baby with her man who isn't married to him. He takes care of the baby while she's prime minister. And
I love him, whoever he is.
yes, he's a wonderful role model.
Mhm.
And in February, she got on the internet. She has these chats regularly on the internet, on the radio, everywhere. There was an order: shelter in place. We need one another to get over this. Then they tested everyone, they tracked the testing, and they healed the sick. They have 1 death in all of New Zealand. Now, New Zealand is not like the United States, but they have a little over 7 million people. It's like almost all of New York City, where we are the epicenter. The United States has the most cases in the world.
And New York City has the most cases, of
The United States.
it holds the bulk of the cases in the United States.
That's right.
Yes.
Because what they did was isolate, then
Test.
track, test, and then track the tests and heal people. And there were, because unlike Trump, they didn't sell the stockpiled gear. Katie Porter, invincible and courageous Congresswoman, has the receipts that she held up where he sold our ventilators. The price was going up because of COVID. So he sold the ventilators and the protective personal equipment and got a lot of money for it. Meanwhile, of course,
Trump himself?
The government under
government.
Trump's guidance. And
yeah, the government now is just a reallocation fund from the people to, the millionaires and billionaires. So
right, and
yeah,
the military.
He and his friends, right.
So he and his friends benefited while we lost and are unprepared. And of course, he shifts blame, but that's the truth.
I wish he would do some online therapy, because maybe, although I'm understanding that narcissism is practically impossible to treat. Is that true?
You have to admit you have a problem. You can't come in, just like you don't go into a 12-step program and say, I am Donald Trump and she over there is an alcoholic. No, you have to claim your stuff first. You have to say, I need help. That's why so many more women are in therapy than men, because a lot of men feel it's unmanly to say, I need help. That's also why, interestingly enough, men die 50% more than women, even though they get COVID equally. Because a lot of macho men think it's sissy to wash your hands all the time or to wear a mask.
Well, you can even hear that machismo in Chris Cuomo, who is, on CNN, who the anchor there, who has come down with COVID. He's talking about, even Andrew Cuomo has said, well, I know Chris is going to be okay. He's strong. There's this false idea that strength, if you're strong, you'll beat it. But that is not the case. This is really about, like, does the virus get through your lung lining and destroy it, or does it not? It has nothing about work. It's nothing about working out that has
No.
that has to do with this. But you can see that machismo, and he gets on the air. I haven't seen him in a little while. Chris himself gets on the air. He's like, last night was so hard, but I'm pulling through. It's this like battle. It's a weird battle mindedness that I don't see my female friends who have had COVID, one in particular, who's keeping me updated. She's saying, you need to rest, you need to let it go. She's much more like, there's like a non-warrior-esque to her approach to the healing from the virus than, say, Chris Cuomo. Chris cracked on Monday, did he? Oh, someone said in our chat stream that Chris, send a video and I will play it of Chris's cracking. I'd like to see what happens. So the machismo cracked. Oh my, we've got reports, Harriet. I'd like to see that.
Also, part of machismo is the idea of self-reliance. It's the denial that you never would have survived without a parent feeding you and clothing you and caring for you emotionally. And you don't survive now without the network of people that supports our lives, the people who create the food, the people who transport it, the people who are behind the grocery shelves getting COVID while they are working, that we're in a network of interdependence. And the idea of the self-made man is silly, but it permeates a kind of machismo, which makes men die sooner, because when they get COVID, they don't say, okay, I'm not going to win, the disease will, unless I give myself time to rest, unless I wash my hands, unless I nurture myself, unless I feed myself properly. That, okay, I have to relinquish my independence here because this disease has gotten a hold of me. And so that men are dying faster, even though they both, men and women, equally get COVID. There are other gender divisions as well, some of which are quite deadly, as a lot of men feel they have to have control. Obviously, they can't here. And they are not working. A lot of people aren't working. And they try to control their household, which is why battered women and abused children are competing with COVID victims in the emergency rooms, because child abuse and wife abuse have spiked. Another means of control, which is particularly male, sadly enough, is guns. They sold more guns in March, just this past March, than have ever been sold in the United States in any month before. And that's with since the FBI had records of gun owners. So people want to get control through a gun. Now, that's another total losing proposition. It just means that everything's more dangerous. You're not going to shoot the COVID virus. And so that all the patterns that put people apart from other people and apart from understanding we need each other, as Jacinda Ardern, my latest crush, has said, she said, remember.
I don't know who that is.
She is the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Oh, I see. Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Proud Prime Minister who had one death. They have eliminated all new cases, but she asked people to stay in place for another 2 weeks to be sure. She's not racing in before it's time. She's giving it time, which is right. So did the Prime Minister of Taiwan.
So they're really putting the health and nurturance of their people above, like, we got to open up this economy. People got to make money, right?
Right, especially the people who are the bosses who are making money off of other people's labor.
Mm.
And they in New Zealand, like all the other developed countries, it's one of the reasons we're the worst in COVID. Even England, which is second to worst, they give people their regular salaries so that the economy can continue. 80% is what they give, 80% of their salary, and the government makes up to the employer the 80% they've given over. And that's where the money is spent. Here, Trump throws out $1,200 period, which doesn't even cover most people's rent, and then gives the bank permission to take possession of it if you have debts.
I've actually heard that people did get that check. And if anyone is watching who got their check, please put it in the chat. I haven't had a chance to check, but I did see some friends on Facebook reporting that their check came in. So
that's good. I guess they don't have debts that the government gave the banks to repossess that one little check that they so desperately need because they're in debt.
insane.
In any case, we are in trouble here because our leadership is utterly focused on getting reelected and making money rather than the health of our population.
Harriet, we had sometimes, even the conversations that are had in media spaces where you are really aware of what is going on in terms of the pariah nature of our current system. We had Chris Hedges on yesterday. You are clearly, every time you or Richard Wolff or any really of our guests comes on to give us, a good general idea of what we are facing and really the viciousness of what we are facing. How do you suggest, as a mental health counselor, people who want to be in the know then process the information that is so very difficult to understand, that, it's kind of like I'm living in a Shark Tank, and people go into denial around it. People don't want to take place in politics or don't want to take part in the political process. How would you suggest people cope with the current situation?
Well, one way, the first kind of mastery one can get is understanding. Understanding this system is very important. Understanding that children ought to have been tutored. Looking at the food system and understanding that the problem is profit, that farmers are destroying crops because they can't sell them properly. Well, they never sold them directly. Big corporations bought their food, and a lot of the food went to hotels, to restaurants, to institutions, to schools, to colleges.
But some people who wind up getting the information just become depressed. And so I'm always kind of
understand first, and you say, wait a minute, that's ridiculous to have profit in between everything. Why don't, now that we have that food and it's not going to the institutions, the government should buy the food and distribute it. Food pantries are out of food. To understand, wait a minute, there are better ways. And then the second part of understanding is we will work together to make them. We are the majority. And then
I always find that the connection between people, as you become active, you see the atrocity, then you become active in its healing. And by becoming active in that, I don't know, flow or whatever you want to call it, in that vein of healing activity, you become connected to other people who are doing that healing work, and you are healed. And so I always suggest, once don't get depressed, get angry, and then go out and help.
And there's lots of ways to help. And people are protesting all over the country. There were strikes in Birmingham, Alabama. There were strikes in Detroit. The transit workers of New York are thinking of striking because they're dying. So
I
many.
hope they do. We just discussed that yesterday. Like, when they should strike, please strike. I'm begging them to strike. I will strike with them. This is.
We don't have, one of the things is there has to be profit for anything to work. That's why the food system isn't going to work that long, because the middlemen don't, it's not profitable enough. So they don't buy the milk from the farmers or the vegetables or the meats, rather than the government step in. That's what they did in the New Deal. They didn't let profit choke the population. FDR came in and took over. There were 11 million jobs that he created for people. With today's population, it would be 22 million well-paid jobs in the United States.
Mhm.
And in all of these countries, they worked together. There's a sense, if you're isolated and frightened, it's terrible. You have to be connected. That's the source, the most important aspect of mental health is connection with others, which is difficult in a time of the plague. However, it's possible.
Actually, that brings us right back to sort of one of the main things I wanted to plumb your expertise for, which is, some patients with um, mental health issues such as addiction and depression. For some, face-to-face contact is absolutely key for their recoveries, especially in the early stages. Can you talk about the fact that pretty much all therapy is mediated by a computer now, and what is lost in that interaction?
Well, first of all, the brain has to work harder to process connection without all the cues that another person's body and mind give you. I remember particularly talking to a client who was talking about what a great family she had, but she was kicking with her leg while she was talking. So her leg was saying, ooh, ooh.
I don't think so. Yeah.
They're so nice. And so that the physical proximity of this client, rather than just seeing her top the way one does, told me things. Plus the little signals of the tension in another body, of the way the shoulders are, the hips, the feet, the hands in a fist, balled up or relaxed. These are all physical cues we get from one another. And without those physical cues, it's harder. Mm-hmm. It's possible. One has to work harder, because looking into someone's eyes directly is a different experience. And therapy works in part. And of course, therapy works because it creates biochemical changes, just because we're biochemical entities, and whatever we do has biochemical elements, always. That we look at one another, we relate to one another, and in therapy, the sense of connection, that someone, maybe for the first time in your whole life, somebody hears you, someone recognizes you. I remember I had a client who worked in a factory, and he would come in and say, "This is so confusing. Nobody ever listened to me. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to handle it." 1 in 4 Americans say no one knows them.
Oh, yeah. And once, it's very interesting what you said about that client, because I've seen that once he gets the thing that maybe he was longing for and doesn't know what to do with, all of the grief over not having had it tends to bubble up, and it threatens to wash the person back out into not coming. I can't handle this. I'm not gonna do this. So
that's right. That's what he eventually stopped coming. It was too much for him. And one of the things you can see is the outrageous loneliness of this culture. And I really was quite impressed looking at Craigslist It used to be wanted, discreet sex in the afternoon, or, whatever, S&M, whatever. Now it's wanted, quarantine bay, a baby, a woman, to come with me in the quarantine. One guy who I found particularly sad said, "Look, I have an isolated house in New Jersey," which usually would scare any woman off.
Just New Jersey itself, and then the isolated house part is, yeah.
But I can keep you safe. Please come and be with me,
Oh,
because another man wanted a woman to come with him as he delivered medical supplies all day and into the night because it was so lonesome in his truck. That instead of sex being the currency, loneliness was the currency. And that impulse is actually a very healthy impulse, because people shouldn't be all alone. And if what we have to do is trust the internet, okay, make Zoom chats or FaceTime or something with other people, and therapy is affected. I have several clients who just they don't want it. They don't want therapy now because they count on the physical connection of being in a room with no distractions, just the focus on their own inner life with a witness who wants to help them.
And just seeing you today over the Zoom, the reason it kind of works for us, because I feel that whatever flood of connection chemicals even over the Zoom, is because I know you outside of this relationship of being a guest. I know I've been to your home, you've been to in my part of my life. There's so I feel, I can recall that and feel that physical sense of you, even though really the picture of you is over here and I am kind of looking at a camera so that it seems like I'm looking at you, but really I don't see you at all other than when you're first here. But if you're a new client and you're struggling with the perhaps you weren't a client at all and you just are so struggling with everything that the coronavirus has, and the economy and Trump, whatever. I mean, how many, which
Yeah,
one is the straw that's going to break the camel's back? It's a little different because maybe I would never have met you. And so they're in person, and therefore it's like, you could be an artificial intelligence that I'm talking to, and there would be no difference. If that just, am I making any sense here? It seems like because I already know the therapist, but there's a connection there that I can call up in myself. But if a new client comes in, they don't have that physical memory of a connection to the therapist.
and yet there is so much that can be communicated, even over the phone. I've had 2 conversations with people who were interested in therapy. And after the conversation, they both, 2 of them, not everybody doesn't do this, but 2 guys that I've talked to said, "Look, I'd like you to be my mother." Family that, that doesn't look possible. Okay, let's work together.
Yep.
Because nurturance can be conveyed. It's not as immediate, it's not as good, but it's there. And I must say, in praise of the 12-step programs, they all went on the internet and people communicate with each other. Now, a lot of them have been on 12-step programs before. And so they have a sense of the meeting and a sense of the people. And I have one client who's been going for 10 years to AA. So it's his second home. But however we have to connect, we have to connect.
Harriet,
it's not as adequate as it used to be.
Harriet, do you have thoughts about the mind-body connection when it comes to the coronavirus?
Yes, I do. Because one of the things that's really interesting is when we look at plagues past, the bubonic plague that killed 1 out of 3 people across Europe in the 12th and 13th centuries happened as feudalism was no longer possible. The land They didn't know about replenishing the land, so the land became less fertile. They couldn't create as many crops, the feudal serfs, to give over to the Lord, whose demands became greater and greater. Their children, in good times, they had more children, and those children had nothing, no land to work on. And the whole people were oppressed. And when I look at what's happening now, particularly in the US, with which I'm most familiar, I think capitalism is folding. People are working hard and they're not making a life and they're depressed. And I think that the ability of this profit has gone out of control here. There's no bounds to it. And because of that, it's it's unmanageable and it's folding, particularly in the United States, which is doing worst in the world. Because I think the idea of putting money in between everything you do, I feel it myself. I like to just talk to people and help them.
Right.
I have to charge them money.
Which is the beauty of the 12-step programs, because the sponsors and the people are all volunteers. And so it takes away
That's
the money
right.
part. Mm-hmm.
It does. And you're not allowed to have anything for profit. It's a really socialist or communist system, even though they obviously don't advertise it as such. But it's from each according to his or her abilities, to each according to his or her needs, which was the basic communist slogan. You know, look, every ideal system can be corrupted, just like capitalism is one thing in France, it's another thing in Brazil. Looks more like fascism. Okay. But that is an embracing ideology. You have to figure out checks and balances of power and all the rest. But I'll tell you a story which really illustrates it. There is a company in Germany that is getting close to a vaccine.
Mm.
They have two presidents, two CEOs in Germany, and they have one in the United States. The one in the United States, in Boston, met with Trump and Pence, and Trump and Pence offered $1 billion, about 5 times more than that company is worth, to have an exclusive control over whatever vaccine is created. Well, the two Germans fired the American and said, there's a limit to capitalism. When we get this vaccine, it will be for the whole world.
Yay.
Because if you have to make money off of things, you're in trouble. That's the trouble with the food supply. You have to make money off it instead of just feed the people. It's a problem with our health system too.
Harriet,
so I have to stop.
No, don't be sorry at all. There's so many that I love this, and I'm thrilled that you're still here on that line, even though we've been going for a long time. There's definitely two things I want to hit. And one of them is a text I got from someone who I'll have to keep anonymous, but it is a person in my family who I did not ask permission to share this. So I'm going to have to keep it as anonymous as possible, although it probably won't be. For those of you who may know this person. So this is a text I got from someone who is actively practicing the quarantine. And I think it's related to capitalism. And you'll have to excuse me for having to scroll through to get this. Here's the quote. I'm learning something about myself in this extended being locked in the house. Yes, I learned that because there's no other thing that I feel the supreme pressure to be doing, like working, bringing home an income, making myself presentable to the outside world, that I don't feel guilty that all the pressures there are about all the pressures. There's no pressure on me right now to do all of that. Literally, my personal life, my personal career, my person I'm supposed to be in the world we live in doesn't have to happen right now. I can even with all the other stuff I do at the house and for others, I can do it joyfully and happily without feeling incredibly pressured and rushed and trying to do Too many things. I spent yesterday boiling and babysitting beans in a pan for 5 hours while doing other things like washing clothes and whatever. And I feel happy, ecstatically happy that I was able to do that, to focus on quality, not just getting another thing done. Food, quality food cooked in the house with no preservatives, and soon quality food from hopefully yard to table she's starting to plant. I'm so happy. In my heart, it's true happiness. I slowed down. I had been moving too fast. But the biggest thing I learned is that I carry this enormous crushing guilt and pressure to be a functioning, productive worker at a job. That I was basically programmed to believe that my value comes from working, and that if I'm not working, I'm not valuable. I should be ashamed and constantly trying to find more work and making something out of myself, making more and more a human doing versus a human being. Fucking Protestant work ethic. It's amazing. The other places don't bring up their families like that. In Italy, they say it's family first. Take care of your family, not go get a paycheck, because becoming a productive society honeybee in the hive. And then there was, I told her that I often said that I feel that my dad was killed by, you know, capitalism and was killed by NAFTA. And she wrote the following: yes, the North American free trade assassination, which I thought was
Cute.
genius. And then the final thing that was said was, that I thought was important here. Um, yes, I can't believe how extraordinarily happy my soul was. I know it's crazy. I had to go outside and pick fucking dandelions, and it's stuff I used to do at my grandmother's when I was a kid. I can remember doing it even now talking to you. I feel this supreme, incredible joy just surging through me.
Well, that's very sweet. But part of what capitalism in the United States, which is unbridled, Italy, France, Germany, all the Scandinavian countries, New Zealand, they have labor parties, they have socialist parties, they have communist parties, they have monarchist parties. People have democracy in that they have a choice of a system, not just a person, and one tendency within capitalism versus another. And their values are different. I remember, it's they work
I was
to
thinking that I think the slowing down, I think the reason that I brought this up, Harriet, was because the slowing down of, sorry to cut you off, the slowing down of, because I really want your thought about this particular line of thinking, is the slowing down is actually, it's more of a problem for capitalism than just a crashing economy. It's people stopping and questioning their values in their life and seeing, hey, maybe there is a better way. Maybe this treadmill isn't necessary. I think this is happening with the environment. People are saying, wait a minute, the skies are clear. I could get used to this kind of thing. And I think that's actually quite dangerous for the system that we have in place, that people might stop a minute and think, it's actually a little bit, other than the lack of connection and the being stuck in a house, better when we slow it down.
Absolutely, because one of the things the United States has been cheated by capitalism, where you think that work is everything. It isn't. People who are rich, like the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, even though he beats his workers, I mean, he spent $500 million because he was interested in getting himself into outer space. Of course, I'm interested in getting him into outer space too, but for different reasons. But, Trump plays golf all the time. I mean, other people, I remember the Rockefellers got into being governors to entertain themselves. People who have money do things to entertain themselves as well as work. They don't live to work. They work to live. It's a different thing. I remember being in Paris and talking to a person at a market, a person who goes around from market to market selling salamis and cheeses. And I said, wow, you do this so well. Do you want to be in charge? He said, no, I like what I do. I like what I do. I get to talk to people. I get to travel, I get time off. And I realized, how could he afford that attitude? Well, his education is free from early childhood through college. His insurance isn't necessary. He gets a clothing allowance for his children if he doesn't have the money. He gets free health care. Well, I could see he'd have a more casual attitude because he has support in his life. He doesn't have to do everything by himself, bring up his children, have the full weight of the responsibility.
Yes.
It's all free. I mean, he works and makes a living.
Where does this person live, and does he have an extra room?
Yeah, exactly. He lives in southern France,
Yeah.
which is very pretty. But it's when I talked to him for a while. He had a 10-year-old boy. After school, the bus comes. They take them all to outside activities until 6 o'clock when the day ends. It's a whole different ball game, and so that they can afford not to worry all the time about making money because they have some care. We're the richest country in the world, and we don't take care of people. And I think people are catching on and saying, wait a minute, those who have some international perspective, why are they all doing better than us? Why are we doing worst in the whole world?
No wonder Trump wants to stop people from traveling. He doesn't want them to know that there's another way.
His golf courses in Scotland and England, that's why one of the exceptions to being at home is to go to residential recreational facilities, which are the golf courses where you buy a wildly expensive condo to have access to the private golf course, because the condos ring the golf course.
Why aren't those pesticides that they use on the golf course working faster on the golfers?
Why do they work only on the lawn? Right?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Harriet, a final question that I have for you is, I guess it's a whole nother final area of discussion, I guess, before we have to go, is that therapy is great, obviously, for those who can access it, but many healthcare providers don't cover it. And especially many don't cover it if it's, on the internet. What would you recommend to someone who is in need of therapy but can't afford it or can't access it for other reasons? And your thoughts about how the healthcare system doesn't cover it sometimes.
Well, first, the thought on how the healthcare doesn't cover it. When it does cover it, it pays practitioners about half of or less of what they would get, and they constantly have to rationalize why they're not medicating people, which is a lot cheaper for insurance companies because you just go to a psychiatrist. He spends 15 minutes with you every 3 months.
Can't you just put in the little box because you can't talk to a pill?
Right.
Over and over the same.
So most of them don't, 75% of the usual Prozac and Paxil don't even work, according to the studies not by drug companies, where most of them are studied here, but according to the health systems in countries that pay for their people's health, which is all over Europe. So
right, because if you're paying for the people's health, then you don't want to waste the taxpayer dollar, right? And if something doesn't work, then you say, hey, this doesn't work.
So what you need to do is either go online and find help, because there is help, but also reach out to whoever you know who will actually talk to you and say, I just need to talk. Will you listen to me for a bit? We need to connect. The worst thing for humans is to be disconnected. There's something called failure to thrive. If babies aren't talked to and held, but just, stick a bottle in their mouth and look away from them, they die. It's called failure to thrive. They don't learn to sit up. They don't learn to walk. They don't learn anything. We need human contact. And so you need to put human contact in and be as kind as you can, rather than be embarrassed you need it and be mean to people. That obviously won't work out. And the healthcare system is a for-profit healthcare system. So between every healer and their wish to heal comes the need to make money. That is very bad. And it means that in its most extreme manifestation, an enormous number of psychiatrists get minimum 30 grand a year for prescribing certain pills, and the representative of the company comes when they get their colleagues together for wine and cheese provided by the drug company and tout the wonderful benefits of this drug. And if they say anything critical, the gravy train empties. That's it. So that you have direct corruption, you have indirect corruption, you have a kind of harassment for providers that they have to constantly rationalize why they don't medicate you and give your personal information out, so that there's a huge financial incentive not to take care of people, not to give them the time, to put their pain into some little diagnosis that could match with a pill. That's not the way people heal. They heal through connection and understanding. And so that it's a perversion. And people need to reach out wherever they can. They do. They need to reach out and connect. That's the basis of mental health.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for being with us regularly. We've obviously been speaking with Harriet Fraad, mental health counselor and hypnotherapist here in New York, founder of the Second-Wave Feminist Movement. You can follow Harriet on Twitter at Harriet Fraad, F-R-A-A-D. And also check out Capitalism Hits Home. Are you still recording Capitalism Hits Home, Harriet? And now that you're in quarantine?
I did one on the COVID virus, and I'm going to do another one on COVID and gender very soon.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yes.
That's very exciting. Well, we play your podcast regularly here on the program, but we've gotten jammed up over the last couple of weeks. So we will be bringing it back to play on our Twitch channel for everyone. We've got people in our stream Twitch thanking you for being on, sending big hearts and love to you.
Oh, big hug to all of them.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good. Thank you so much.
Bye, Harriet. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.